Senator Young. Senator Young, you're recognized for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Today, the FCC and NTIA released a new Memorandum of Understanding on Interagency Spectrum Coordination. Ms. Baker, in your testimony, you highlight the importance of enhancing interagency coordination for spectrum decisions. Director Van Ah, your testimony is titled Improved Planning and Interagency Collaboration could strengthen spectrum reallocation efforts. So I know that you come at this from slightly different directions, and I was wondering whether you could both discuss the importance of interagency spectrum coordination and how the U.S. can improve current efforts. Mr. Vano.
Thank you for the question, Senator Young. Yeah, I mean, the importance of that collaboration is to ensure that we avoid conflicts that can't be resolved, where you've got agencies who are, either and to be perfectly frank, that we're not jeopardizing either national security or public safety in terms of the federal government use of that spectrum. And so understanding the ways in which reallocated uses might affect users in adjacent bands is extremely important. Ensuring that those views are expressed and considered as FCC licenses that spectrum and makes rules around power levels and other things, I think is also important. So we're very encouraged by the new MOU. I think it goes directly to the heart of the recommendations we made. And I think it's going to have a great impact on the level of collaboration.
Thank you. Ms. Baker, you have a complementary way to look at it.
I agree that the MOU well, we have two great leaders at the NTIA and at the FCC, and this MOU, maybe it's a response to spectrum coordination, but it's also a real testimony to their leadership. It's a good step. It's a good first step. I do think that there need to be other steps taken. I think raising the level of the administrator job to an undersecretary shows the power that that office needs to have as being the final arbiter in federal spectrum arguments. We need to empower both of those leaders to do their jobs.
Thank you. Dr. Bazelon and Ms. Baker, when Congress gave the FCC auction authority in 1993, it created what many of us see as one of the most valuable tools in the FCC's toolkit, raising revenue for the Treasury, benefiting consumers with critical services and coverage, establishing a straightforward method of licensing and making sure that spectrum's held by those who value it most and put it to its most productive use. Currently, the FCC's auction authority is set to expire in less than 2 months on September 30th. Can you both discuss the importance of extending the FCC's auction authority, please?
Extending the FCC's auction authority is critical. We need them to be powerful and able to do their jobs. We are supporting, I like the 18-month extension for a couple of reasons, and that they are allowed to do their jobs and that it holds the rest of the stakeholders to the fire to make sure that we get a spectrum pipeline, because we need to have a spectrum pipeline because the rest of the world is moving forward. So I think it's critical for the FCC to have spectrum auction authority. I support them to have a longer auction authority, but I think it really needs to be tied to specific bands so that we can make sure those auctions happen.
Thank you.
Allowing auction authority to expire would be an own goal for our policymakers. It is a critical tool in our spectrum management arsenal. The length of time of the authority, we have to extend it. It creates the benefit of the auctions is it creates the courage to make a reallocation happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise by creating the budgetary incentives. Those incentives will exist whether or not there's a long-term extension done in the next, whether it's 18 months or longer. Of course, there will be a stronger budgetary incentive if you do an 18-month and plan the directed reallocations afterwards.
Thank you. And Ms. Baker, just as my time comes to a close here, the FCC is currently conducting an auction. So what happens, in terms of the on-the-ground reality should the auction authority expire?
Well, thank you for your question. It is an important auction. We have over 80 bidders, over 80 companies bidding on that spectrum, which I think shows how important it actually is. And the answer is we don't know, because Congress has never let auction authority lapse before. So it creates an awful lot of uncertainties, and we know bidders don't need uncertainties.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll hear from the chair.